All right, Week 14 for the NFL in 2025 is in the books. This is going to be my reaction video, as well as now that we are past Week 14, I am going to also include a sort of playoff predictions portion to the end of this video. So if you want to see that, you want to know my reactions to some of the games that we just watched this weekend, stick around. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe if you'd like to see more NFL content from me going forward. But without further ado, let's get into it. Just some quick thoughts and reactions to Week 14 for the NFL. Going back to Thursday, the Lions hosted the Cowboys, won by a score of 44-30, convincing win, a good win for a Lions team who had gotten a little cold there for a minute, had been getting some doubts put on them, and going up against a Cowboys team, this game being in Detroit, a Cowboys team that had been a little bit hot, that was coming off of a couple really, really big wins, including against the Chiefs on Thanksgiving. But week following that, the Lions able to come out with the win against the Cowboys. Cowboys, high-scoring game overall, but Cowboys defense just not managing to get enough of a stop. We've seen from this Cowboys attack that on defense it looked like the defense had been getting better. It looked like they were getting somewhere as far as solidifying that. They've been one of the worst defenses this season, but had shown some improvement in the last couple weeks, but up against the Lions, allowing 44 points. The offense, not perfect, but scoring 30. Dak Prescott still having a pretty good game. Some lack of effort for the Cowboys for George Pickens, which was a little bit concerning. But, for the Lions, they get the win, go to 8-5, which is good for them and their playoff hopes. They're certainly still alive. I wouldn't suggest counting the Lions out of it. Yes, they are on the outside looking in currently, but as we'll see here in a couple minutes when I get into the playoff calculating machine, we'll see that the Lions' playoff hopes are very much alive. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Thursday game really quick. Going into Sunday's slate, the first game that stands out from the early slate of games would, of course, be the Bengals at the Bills. Joe Burrow back in action, of course, second week back in action from the long-term injury. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, all the Bengals on offense really back up to full speed, and this was a really fun matchup. Kind of unfortunate that it ended up getting stashed in the early slate of games, but we had a pretty good slate of games throughout the week, to be fair, but this one would have been one that would have certainly been pretty fun as a primetime game. But part of the reason this game was so fun was it was a classic winter snow game in Buffalo. Buffalo is certainly one of those cities, and with an open stadium that is perfect for late season possible snow games. There have been some pretty classic ones there in Buffalo over recent years, and this one was no different. You would typically think this time of year with the cold weather, and we did see it in a lot of outdoor games this week. You might expect lower scoring, struggles on offense, that kind of thing, but this Bills-Bengals game, to no surprise when you think about the two teams, regardless of the snow, it was still a super high-scoring matchup, with the Bills coming out with the win in the end with a score of 39-34. The Bengals playing their tails off. Both quarterbacks here, of course, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, top quarterbacks in this league and in the AFC. And they went toe-to-toe, and if it weren't for outside of a couple bad picks late there for the end, or bad throws there at the end for Joe Burrow, he had an excellent day. Josh Allen, like usual, was asked to pretty much be Superman at some points for the Bills, and was able to do that. I still, for the Bills or for the Bengals, it's of course unfortunate that they are now 4-9. They're basically out of playoff contention. They're not there yet. They're not eliminated due to being in the AFC North, which of course is them, the Browns, Steelers, and the Ravens. So obviously that's a division this year that is very the top isn't very high on wins. So technically the Bengals aren't out of it yet. They could technically win the division. They're basically out of the wild card race. They're not going to get into the wild card picture. They're more likely to get a division win, if anything, to get into the playoffs. But I wouldn't say that even that is super likely, although really nobody in the AFC North is looking like they're ready to run away with it, to be honest. So, I wouldn't necessarily count the Bengals out just yet, but, of course, their defense can't stop anybody. So I would be surprised if the Bengals get into the playoffs. So, a bit unfortunate for them. You were missing Joe Burrow for 9 weeks. What was he in for the whole season? Would they have a better record? I think maybe a little bit, but even in Joe Burrow's career when he's been healthy and he's been playing for the Bengals in his career, they're really not that far above 500, and the stats on it, even when Joe Burrow is healthy, are kind of crazy. The amount of times that he and that offense have gotten them to 30-plus points, and the low amount of times that they've then won those games is pretty sad. The Bengals have not had a near close to even average defense in a long time. So it's certainly unfortunate for the Bengals, a bit frustrating for their fans. It's part of what happens when you pay your quarterback and you pay both your top 2 wide receivers and a bunch of other talent on the offense. You just have no money for defense. So a little bit tough there, but for the Bills, they do come out with the win on this one, but similarly to the Bengals, not to the same extent though, I still think this Bills defense this year is a little suspect. And I just, come playoff time, I do think the Bills will be there. I do think that the Bills are going to make it, at least with a wild card berth. I don't think they're going to win the division. I think the Patriots pretty much have that at this point. But I do certainly see the Bills making it into the playoffs. They are 9-4 now. So it would be pretty surprising if they didn't make it at this point. But I just, come playoff time, they do have a good amount of playoff experience now at this point compared to some of the other AFC teams that are going to be in it. So I certainly would trust the Bills to win at least a game or 2, maybe at least make it to the AFC Championship game. But I don't know that I trust the Bills to make it all the way this year and win it all, just because I just don't trust their defense and then their run game still. They do have James Cook, of course, who sometimes can be really good some games, but some games he struggles with ball security, and then just in general, it's still not the strongest running game. That's not all on James Cook, but the Bills have just, that's one of the knocks on the Bills as far as what they've been able to put around Josh Allen is, again, whether it's receiver talent or the run game, they just haven't been able to put very much around Josh Allen each year to where often, again, it feels like Josh Allen very often is having to be Superman for the team, and sometimes it is the Bills' defense maybe not living up to expectations or to what the team needs. It's not a new saying, but especially come playoff time, defense wins championships. There's a reason that saying is a thing, and so I worry for the Bills' chances if and when they do get into the playoffs. I worry about how far they'll really be able to go. But I do certainly see them in it, and I do think they can make a run. I just have doubts about them winning it all, mainly because of that defense. But to the Bills' credit overall, again, you're going up against the Bengals, who, regardless of their record, gunslinger, guns a-blazing offense is what the Bengals bring. Even without Joe Burrow, they bring that basically every week. So, I don't want to blame the Bills too much for the high scoring game, but there have been a handful of games this year where they've lost to even lesser teams that they were highly favored over, and the defense just couldn't get enough stops. For anybody that cares, we had the draft position game between the Titans and the Browns. Titans come out of it with a record of 2-11, and the Browns go down to a record of 3-10. Do lose to the Titans at home for Cleveland does. Titans get a win on the road, and regardless, in that win, Shedeur Sanders coming in at quarterback for the Browns looked pretty good. Now, it was against the Titans, Titans defense and team that hasn't been able to win more than twice now, but once against a different opponent, and that was against the Cardinals, another not great team. So against a really weak opponent, but for being a fifth-round pick, for the amount of time that the Browns have stashed him and tried their hardest to not play Shedeur, he came in and put up some really good numbers. 23 for 42, not the greatest completion percentage by any means, but 364 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's just through the air. Also made plenty good plays with his legs as well. That is one of the talents that Shedeur Sanders does bring, is his running ability. And it was announced today, I'm recording this Monday, it was announced by Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach, that Shedeur is going to have the starting job the rest of the way, which makes sense. I mean, there's been plenty of conspiracy theories and accusations towards the Browns and towards Kevin Stefanski about him not wanting Shedeur in the first place, not wanting to, refusing to play him. Of course, even in this game, some questions about why late in the game at the end, with the 2-point attempt that the Browns made to try to tie it up, they took Shedeur Sanders out of the game and tried to do, got way too cute with a play on a 2-point attempt and failed, and that was why the Titans ended up winning. And so, there's obviously questions why Shedeur, with the high amount of stats he put up during the day, why do you take him out on the most important play? But regardless, Stefanski does, name him the starter for the rest of the season, which, again, I feel like kind of forced to. Like, it'd be kind of crazy if you didn't name him the starter the rest of the way. And regardless of what Stefanski and the Browns think of Shedeur, at this point, it only makes sense for them to, give Shedeur the rest of the season. Obviously, you're out of contention. You've been out of contention for a while. You've given Dillon Gabriel plenty of weeks this year to start. So you kind of know sort of what you got with him. Pretty limited. So, for the Browns, who have a million quarterbacks and therefore no good quarterback, you got to try out what you've got. So you've given Dillon Gabriel a few weeks to start. I believe he ended up having like 6 or 7 so far this year. Maybe more. Maybe it ended up being more like 8 that Dillon Gabriel started. But we got a pretty good picture for what he's looking like with the Browns. Now you've got Shedeur, who I believe this was his second start playing. But, so you give him the rest of the season. You maybe get a little bit more of a picture for what he can do a little bit in the NFL. Obviously the Browns are going to have, high draft picks in the rounds of the draft. So, for the Browns, of course, we'll just have to see what they do. Dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. I'm not sure if they're going to fire Kevin Stefanski, former Coach of the Year award, although I've said it before. I think that award is kind of cursed. A lot of times coaches win that in like their first or second year with a team, and then after that, the team success year after year goes down after they've won that award. And I mean, all you got to do is look up the Coach of the Year winner awards for the last decade. More than half of those are no longer with the team they won it with. So, interesting there. But yeah, the reason I say dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things, of course, with Kevin Stefanski, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a Browns fan. I don't know what the pulse is from what Browns fans want necessarily. Not that us fans necessarily always know what's best for the team either. But I don't necessarily think, I still don't know that Stefanski is the worst coach, but at the same time, he's had it's not like the Browns have just had him for 2 years. He's had for coaches who don't have success, he's had a good bit of a runway with the Browns so far, partially because of how highly he's been viewed as a coach. But the thing that I'm really questioning right now is that I've heard reports that, some of you may think, oh, I didn't even know he was in the league. The Browns do still have Deshaun Watson. Now, of course, he's been away from the team this year, but due to injury and all the stuff that's been going on with Deshaun Watson over the years, they do still own his rights. They do still have him under contract due to the insane guaranteed long-term contract they gave him years ago. And the rumors are that the ownership group for the Browns wants to go with starting Deshaun Watson next year, which just seems crazy to me because it's been years since we've seen Deshaun Watson play sustained football for a long period of time and play well. We've seen him, we saw him for a handful of games last year with the Browns. He didn't look nearly like what he used to way back when with the Texans, which at this point feels like forever ago in NFL from an NFL standpoint, feels like the last time we saw Deshaun Watson playing in the league and playing well was a long time ago. So I know you put a lot of money into him, but it seems a little silly to me if you're the Browns to really give Deshaun Watson much of a serious look. I don't know. Maybe Shedeur Sanders really isn't it. Again, obviously you got the rest of the season to at least get a little look, but that's a pretty short leash to give it a young quarterback. You got to give him more time than that. And again, that's the problem when you have so many quarterbacks. Again, you really have none. You just can't give them, especially young quarterbacks, can't give them enough of a shot. And when you have a bad enough roster around them, how good of a shot are you really even getting to see what they're going to be in the NFL? I don't know. Dysfunctional teams. But yeah, with that win for the Titans, they played themselves out of the number 1 overall draft position. That now goes to the Raiders for the moment. So Las Vegas Raiders fans, you are now in the number 1 pole position for the draft. So, lose out if you want to make sure you get that. Because I would assume the Titans aren't going to win many more the rest of the year, if any. So I'm not expecting the Raiders to do so either. So, between the Titans, Browns, Raiders, they'll certainly be in that top 5 come draft time. Some other games, early slate, Vikings shut out the Commanders in Minnesota. A decent game for J.J. McCarthy, but against a Commanders team that is just flat, basically zero hope. Had Jaden Daniels come back, but even in this game, he came back already, had some moments of looking a little banged up, just not looking right. That Commanders team is just really deflated, really going the wrong direction right now. The Dolphins go on the road to the Jets and get the win. Dolphins are now up to 6-7, which, based on compared to where the Dolphins were 4 or 5 weeks ago and how bad things were looking, they've at least somewhat turned it around. They've been beating some weaker teams, but at least they're pretty close to 500 now. Technically not out of the playoff race yet. They're in the hunt technically. We'll see here in a second how unlikely that is, but probably one of the most shocking outcomes of the week was the New Orleans Saints going on the road to Tampa Bay and beating their rivals in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by a score of 24-20. And Tyler Shuck, hasn't had a great year. Young rookie quarterback with the Saints, who obviously, have a lot of issues. But, to their credit, they've looked pretty feisty in some games. I do think Kellen Moore very much has a chance to be a good head coach. And certainly at the very least, he's a creative offensive mind, which can be a good thing. And with a young quarterback like Shuck, I haven't had much faith or belief in him all year, but, who knows? If they can continue to be a feisty team, that obviously they're going to end up having a bad record, have some good draft picks. If, this is a weak quarterback draft, at least that's what scouts and experts are saying. So if that comes true, if you're the Saints and you really don't feel like you love any of the quarterbacks this year, maybe you stick with Shuck for another year. You draft some other players high and see what, give Shuck another year, and at least you can use some high draft picks on some other good players. And then if Shuck does okay next year, cool. If he doesn't, maybe the 2027 draft has a better class that you feel like you can go up and get somebody. But back to the Saints-Buccaneers game, it was a wild one. It was very wet. At one point during the game, it was raining sideways, literally. The field conditions were really bad. But for the Buccaneers, they're going the wrong way. They're now at 7-6. And they are not a lock to win their division at this point. Now, similar to the AFC North, in the NFC, it's the NFC South that is going to be that division with just one team in that gets the 4th seed. So currently, basically all season, that has been the Buccaneers in that position, in pole position to win that. But with the loss this week, and with the Carolina Panthers being on a bye this week, this week, by the way, was our final week of bye weeks. Every team has had their bye now, so the rest of the season, it's all go from here on out. But yeah, the Panthers didn't play this week, and with the Buccaneers losing to the Saints, both the Panthers and the Buccaneers now are 7-6. And, based off recent years, you'd still give the advantage to the Buccaneers and faith in them. But they've not been looking that great this last few weeks. And, the Panthers, they've looked feisty this year. A lot more feisty than certainly I expected or many would have. They've been looking much improved from previous years. They've had some bad weeks, but they've had some good weeks against some pretty good opponents. So, I think there's a real chance. And the Buccaneers and Panthers do play coming up later this year. So I think there's a chance that the Panthers sneak their way into the playoffs. We had the Jaguars hosting the Colts. Jaguars won at home 36-19. Colts, another team that is just absolutely going the wrong way. Very devastating for the Colts. However, I can't say I was at all surprised by the outcome of this game, mainly because the Colts, this is one of those weird rivalry things where regardless of what you think of the two teams in the current year, it's just a historical streak that's been going on. The Colts have not won in Jacksonville against the Jaguars since 2014. So going into this game, and also being that the Colts have already been kind of on a downward skid, my money was on the Jaguars. I did win money on this game. Jaguars won convincingly, 36-19. The Colts, unfortunately, the playoff hopes feel like they've been dented a little bit due to losing Daniel Jones to a season-ending Achilles injury, which crazy sentence to be saying. Would not have been expecting to say that before this season started. I did not have high expectations at all for the Colts with Daniel Jones as the quarterback, but Even though he's looked limited at times and he's had some not great games this year, they've certainly also they've had a lot of great games this year, and those were with Daniel Jones at the helm. A lot of those were led by their rushing attack, but he's put up some good numbers and had some good games. But he's out for the rest of the season now. So at quarterback now for the Colts, you've got Riley Leonard, you've got Anthony Richardson third, and then it was just announced today that the Colts are bringing in Phillip Rivers to work out, at least to bring him on to the practice squad. Phillip Rivers has not played in 5 years. He's, I believe, 44 years old. So it would be pretty crazy to see him suit up. But, I mean, the Colts are pretty desperate at this point. They're 8-5 now. They've really skidded the last few weeks. Jaguars and Texans have leapt them in the division. Colts certainly not out of it, but just the momentum that they have compared to what the Jaguars and Texans have. I'm concerned for the Texans. For the Colts. I don't think they're going to win their division at this point, and I think they have a serious chance of sliding out of the playoffs. AFC North matchup. This one very important to the playoff seeding. These are the two teams most likely to make it out of this division. Steelers at the Ravens. Steelers getting the win 27-22. Maybe quieting a little bit of the noise and drama around the Steelers. Plenty of noise this year about, Steelers fans and that community maybe being ready to move on from Mike Tomlin. At least momentarily, this will surely quiet that a little bit. But, for the Ravens, a lot of concern around them. Lamar Jackson just has not looked like himself really all year, including in this game. There hasn't really been much reported as far as injuries go, but you watch Lamar playing and he just does not look like himself. He just does not look right. So I don't know if there's something that he's been avoiding reporting or what it is, but he just doesn't look like the Lamar Jackson that has won multiple MVPs now. Maybe it's just a down year. Obviously, if you're a Ravens fan, that's what you hope. But it just has not been their year. Again, certainly still not out of it. But Steelers go to 7-6, Ravens go to 6-7. So certainly still in the balance. But that win over the Ravens, obviously going to be huge for the Steelers come playoff time, especially if these two end with the same record. Those head-to-head matchups matter a ton. Broncos at the Raiders, no surprise, they get the win, 24-17. Closer than you would like, but that's kind of how the Broncos have been playing every game. Really good defense, an offense that can sputter at times and be a little bit disappointing, depending, pretty much every week. But good coach, great defense. They find ways to win. Obviously, basically every week. They're now 11-2. I believe they're currently sitting at second. Actually, they are currently sitting in first in the AFC, partially thanks to New England. They hold the tiebreaker currently with New England, who is also 11-2. New England had a bye this week, so it's going to be between those two teams, in my opinion, for the number one seed in the AFC. Rams at the Cardinals, another one, not a surprise. Rams dominate the Cardinals after a disappointing loss on the road last week. They come at least back to the West Coast against a divisional opponent in the Cardinals and destroy them 45-17. Not a surprise. This Rams team obviously pretty good. They're at 10-3. Sean McVay's great coach. Of course, he's gonna have his guys ready on a week after a loss like they had last week. they were going to come out ready to stomp the upcoming competition, especially if it's a dysfunctional team in division like the Cardinals. For Sunday Night Football, we had the Texans defeating the Chiefs in Arrowhead by a score of 20-10. The Texans played really well. That defense is one of the scariest in the league. But, of course, the biggest story right now is the Chiefs. They are quite possibly out of it. They aren't technically eliminated yet. Yes, mathematically, they can make it in. They are mathematically eliminated from winning the AFC West division. They are eliminated from that now, this is going to be their first year in a decade that they won't win the AFC West. So that already, for a lot of people out there who are tired of seeing the Chiefs win it every year, that's a good sign for you. And, as far as the playoffs go, they have no margin for error left at all to even make the playoffs. And even if they win out, there is a possibility of them not making the playoffs. But even if they were to make it, I don't know that you fear the Chiefs as much as you would in previous years. Between Travis Kelce looking his age, the receiving core as a whole for the Chiefs, dropping a lot of passes last night, including Travis Kelce, but Rashee Rice letting go of a couple key ones, and Mahomes really trying to press. You could see just moments of him being slow to get up, just feeling the weight of how much they're struggling this year. And then of course the part of the game that is getting talked about the most, pretty questionable move by the Chiefs and by Andy Reid, who one of the smartest, one of the best coaches in NFL history, no doubt about it. Pretty questionable move, going for it on your own 30 on fourth down late in the game, but you still had, I think it was like 5 minutes left to go. The Chiefs elect to go for it on a 4th and 1.5, and you don't get it. And it was a pass that ended up being dropped, but just a bit head scratching to go for it there on your own 30. You did have timeouts. The Texans in drives a little bit before that had shown some life, but for most of the game, the Texans offense had looked pretty anemic. So it's a little bit baffling to me, why Andy Reid elected to go for it there. I know we're in the age of analytics where coaches are being pushed to just go for it almost all the time when it's in 4th and short. But from your own 30, when you have timeouts left, you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. Yes, your offense has been struggling, but your defense has been okay. And again, you've got 5 minutes left to go. That's tons of time. If you punt the ball back, you stop the Texans. Even if you give up a few yards, at least if you punt the ball, their chances of getting into the end zone or even into field goal range much less than going for it on 4th and 1 from your own 30, failing, and now you've put the Texans already in field goal range, and then of course the Texans went on to score a touchdown on top of that. But pretty tough spot to put your defense in, and it felt uncharacteristic of the Chiefs to make a move like that late in the game. Just a little weird. Felt like they were pressing a little too much. And then Monday Night Football, Eagles-Chargers. That game just wrapped up. Ton of field goals. One of the most field goal heavy games I've seen, at least this season. A very heavy field goal game. I know it's not a record breaker by any means, but we had a ton of field goals. This game went into overtime. I believe we had 9 field goals between the two teams, with the Chargers getting the win in the end, 22-19 over the Eagles. Eagles now, that they're kind of skidding a little bit. Of course, there's been plenty of talk of, are they having the 2023 Eagles funk happen again? I don't know that it's that bad drama-wise, but of course the Eagles have had plenty of drama around them this year. I think the team, at least from what I've seen and observed, I feel like the Eagles are handling it better than how they were handling it in previous years. They've kind of always been a dramatic team these last few years. But, I've personally, from my own, from what I've seen, I haven't felt like they've been handling it that bad from a, outside narrative standpoint. But as far as results on the field, there is some concerning stuff, and certainly a concerning trend in that the Eagles have now lost 3 games straight, against some good opponents. But this Eagles offense especially, and Jalen Hurts has just not looked in rhythm. This game in general also, Chargers-Eagles, ton of turnovers between the two teams. They were just giving the ball back and forth to each other, including a play where we had, I believe, 3 turnovers in one play. That's pretty nuts. But yeah, it was pretty emblematic of how the last few weeks have gone for the Eagles. Good defense, good special teams, some again, a lot of field goals, but you did have a missed field goal by Elliott, the Eagles kicker, but the biggest concern for the Eagles is just their offense. Jalen Hurts not always seeing the field the best, missing some throws that are available to him. And then, of course, the Eagles' run game just hasn't been there this year. Obviously, their offensive line has taken a toll from what it's been last year and the year before. But, they dealt with some injuries today as well. But, so that's certainly taking a toll. So a bit of concern there. Eagles dropped to 8-5. They do still control their division. They're still game and a half ahead of the Cowboys, who certainly aren't out of it in their own right. Pretty unlikely that the Cowboys are going to win their division. Certainly still in it for the wild card, but if the Eagles continue to skid, they continue to go on a losing streak, that keeps the Cowboys' hopes for even winning the division alive. And one thing to remember is this NFC East division, this is a division that has gone, I think, close to 2 decades now without having a repeat division winner. So, the Eagles, of course, feel like the team to do it, but, they've basically never had a repeat winner in my lifetime, basically. So, bit concerning there for the Eagles. Final game that I do want to react to, of course, is the Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau. This was a game where the Bears started out looking very anemic on offense. Was very disheartening in that first half. It looked like same old Bears of the past that I've come to know and, live with many years. But the encouraging sign was that second half. Yes, the Bears did go on to lose the game. The Packers won 28-21. But again, the totality of the game was encouraging in my opinion. For the Bears, they started out the game, I believe it was the first 3 or 4 drives with mostly 3 and outs, but really getting no more than like 15 yards in any particular drive. So it was a really bad start to the game for the offense. They go into halftime down 14-3, and I've seen way too many games in Bears-Packers matchups in my lifetime where Bears teams of old, especially in Lambeau, this late in the season, down 14-3, there have been Bears teams in recent years that would have folded at that point, and I was being a Bears fan who has lived through this trauma, even though I do trust Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, I do trust that this franchise is going in an upward trajectory. This is still Bears Packers. It's a different animal. And as Packers fans love to remind everybody, they own the Bears, which certainly in recent years, under Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, and now a little bit with Jordan Love, have pretty much owned the Bears. And one thing going into this game that made me feel not too great, just rivalry history-wise, is the last time the Bears won 2 straight games against the Packers was all the way back in 2006. And the reason I say that was concerning to me was because many people seem to forget, including Packers fans this year, the last time these two teams played was in Lambeau, and it was last season, Week 18, so technically in 2025, and the Bears, with interim head coach, with Caleb Williams, they went in and beat the Packers in Week 18 last year. So had the Bears held on and won, this would have been their second straight win against the Packers, which, again, that would have been their first time since 2006. And I don't even know when the last time was that the Bears won 2 in a row at Lambeau. I would have to look back in the history books. I'm sure that one goes back quite a ways, unfortunately, but maybe not quite as far as I think. But it's not been a great series for the Bears in my lifetime. As much as I still love the rivalry, and as much as it's one that, the 2 games that these two teams play every year feel massively different than any other game week. It was true. This game was also probably one of the most meaningful these two teams have had this late in the season. It's been pretty rare that these two teams have played late in the season and they've both been good at the same time. Oftentimes it's been one is good and the other is eliminated at that point. The last one really that happened before this was one that didn't go my way back in I always forget the exact number. It was 2012 or 2013. I believe it was 2012. But yeah, that was the year that the Packers won the final game of the season in Chicago, and it was the Aaron Rodgers to Randall Cobb knife in the heart of Bears fans, got the Packers to the playoffs and eliminated the Bears. So that was probably one of the last real meaningful games for the Bears Packers late in the regular season. And this one again didn't go our way. Bears did lose by 7 points, but for where this game started, I felt encouraged by that result because the Bears offense did start off really bad, really out of rhythm, but second half started and they turned it around. And to the Bears defense's credit, dealing with some injuries even in this game, we started the game with Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson back in, and both of them missed a good amount of snaps. Mostly Kyler Gordon got hurt. I believe it was either at the very beginning of the game or even in warm-ups, and so therefore basically missed the game. Jalen Johnson played a good amount of the game, but he was out in parts due to some stuff with being a little banged up. So Bears defense still dealing with injuries even elsewhere. It's a Bears defense that does have needs in the defensive front, but they did create a turnover early in the game, intercepting a pass from Jordan Love, but really in that second half, the Bears offense came out, looked really alive, looked like the offense that we have come to expect in recent weeks from the Bears. Really strong run game, really strong run scheme, which is really what Ben Johnson is the best at, is his run schemes, and then play action pass scheming off of that. But yeah, the Bears storm back. They tie the game up 21-21 with 8 minutes left to go. And then unfortunately for the Bears and that defense, it has been a good turnover defense, and it has been opportunistic in that way. They lead the league in takeaways, but as I've said in past weeks, the unfortunate thing for the Bears in that defense, and part of why I talk about the defensive front, is just they're not able to get enough just consistent stops, just getting stops on third down, on fourth down, that kind of thing. It's a defense that is very reliant on takeaways to get the job done on a basis that's enough. And again, sometimes the offense is putting the defense in difficult situations. But, that final drive really was the Bears defense's opportunity to put a stop in the game. The defense had a chance to do that, but couldn't do it. Bears, the Packers got near the red zone. The Bears defense managed to get them into a 3rd and long, and then on a running play where the play looked like it was busted, you had like 3 or 4 Bears, right there where it looked like the tackle was going to be made, and the Packers were going to have to settle for just a field goal, and they just let him, all miss the tackle, basically tackled each other, missed it, which was, just devastating to see. Packers go down, score, go up 28-21, and then the Bears do get the ball back one final time, and, this was a drive that, the Bears have done plenty of times this year on offense. And even last year with Caleb Williams, they've had a lot of late game drives, and Caleb really knows how to turn it on in those drives. And I had no doubt, and sure enough, they got down the field with relative ease. I shouldn't say ease, but just reliably got down the field. Whether it's passing or running with his own legs, Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson schemed themselves and played themselves down the field pretty quickly and easily. But then, of course, the final meaningful play of the game was the issue. They get into a 3rd down. They get into a 4th down in the red zone at about the 20, and the Bears have to go for it. It was a 4th and 1 from the Packers 14, and what the Bears do is they called a play action pass where Caleb is running out to his left, which is not necessarily ideal, certainly for a right-handed quarterback. The argument for why you do that is that defenses are not expecting you to do that generally, so they're going to have the right side of the field more prepared for passes and for a scrambling quarterback to be running that way and passing. So that's the argument for why you might scheme that up like that, especially when you have a talented quarterback like Caleb that can make the fadeaway throw, running to his left. And the other thing is the Bears had done this exact same play last week against the Eagles late in the game, and it worked for them. The difference is that last week against the Eagles, they had more space. I haven't seen enough people talking about this today, but in this week's game, the Bears were starting this play at the Packers 14, whereas last week against the Eagles, they were starting this play at like the 30. So there was a lot more room for this play to develop. But basically what happened, of course, was Caleb runs out to his left. The play is designed, basically everybody's moving out to the left. And you have Cole Kmet, who is running down towards the end zone. And that's the target that Caleb went with last week, and it worked just fine. They had enough room in the play last week where Kmet was able to get space. Caleb could throw it long and high just for Kmet to get it and run into the end zone. Now with this one, there wasn't very much space, so Kmet kind of had to slow down towards the very end of the route, even though he had got some space. But obviously, again, there's just not as much room for him to run, get space, give Caleb a window. And Caleb did not put enough on it this time. And it ends in an interception in the end zone. Now, I have seen also some thoughts of, well, it looked like DJ Moore was coming open on the play. Pretty much right in front of him, you got Caleb, you got a couple Packers defenders, and then you've got Cole Kmet like right behind them and in between them. If you were just watching the game broadcast and the angles they showed, that it did kind of look like that was open to throw it to DJ Moore. The cameras had also shown DJ Moore after the game looking a little frustrated. I don't know if he was necessarily just frustrated that play, if he felt like he was open, or if it was just in general. DJ Moore, maybe certainly fair to be frustrated, not only with the loss, but he was only targeted 3 times in the game, ended with negative yards, and really those 3 targets weren't really fair to count all of them. One of those was an overthrow by Caleb Williams. One of them was a throw where he was really just dirting it, and dirted it in DJ Moore's direction to avoid intentional grounding. And then the one that DJ Moore did catch, he was immediately tackled behind the line because it was a screen play that got blown up. So I don't blame DJ Moore for being frustrated at all. But because of that and what you would have seen on the broadcast, a lot of people have said, well, why didn't Caleb just check it down? Which is what I thought initially too. Why didn't he check it down? The other thing I had personally thought watching it live was I had thought, oh, why didn't Caleb just run it as well? Because Caleb, they talked about it on the broadcast. He's had, I believe it was 4 runs this season where he's reached a top speed over 20 miles per hour. All other quarterbacks this season have only done that 5 times combined. Caleb's done that 4 times. So obviously he's a gifted runner, very fast runner. So during the play, I half thought, oh, Caleb, just run. Just dive for it. You've got it. This is a 4th and 1. You've got it. But when you watch back I watched the all 22 for the game. When you watch specifically the end zone film for this play, I can see why things worked out the way they did. Again, wish Caleb Williams had maybe put a little bit more mustard on the pass that he did decide to go with. Also, had Caleb, and Ben Johnson mentioned this, had he put a little bit more on it, and had Caleb maybe decided to go with the throw about a second earlier, it may have worked out. He just hesitated a little too long. And again, I think part of that, like I was saying, last week, the play worked out. They had a lot more room to roam. So part of me wonders is if Caleb in his own mental clock with that play was, imagining how it felt the previous week, and it just didn't work out with the fact that they were working with less space and therefore less time to get the throw in there. And you just miscalculated the throw. But as far as running it, he couldn't have done that. The 2 defenders that were approaching him would have likely stopped him. So I don't blame him for trying to make it there. Even if he had dove for it and barely gotten it, that one would have been pretty risky. And then as far as the possible pass to DJ Moore, I don't blame him for not throwing that, just because DJ Moore was behind those 2 defenders. And yes, at a point in the film, you can see where it looks like DJ Moore's, he's open. But if you watch the play very slowly, and especially from that end zone angle, you can see that really by the time Caleb has decided to throw and he's making the throw, it's not until he's already making that throw to Cole Kmet that then DJ Moore is open. Now you could argue maybe Caleb, some might argue that maybe Caleb should have been able to see that was going to come open in another half second. But I still think that even if he had decided to try to go with that check down, he would have been at risk of having it just get tipped by one of those defenders that was in between them. But yeah, at least at the time that he made the throw, it really, DJ Moore didn't come open until right as Caleb was already in the throwing motion to the other target. So, it was an unfortunate outcome. The Bears lose 28-21, and they fall all the way from the number 1 seed in the NFC all the way down to the 7th, just with one loss. Packers get back into the top for the division. They sit at 2nd. Rams, with their win over the Cardinals, they get back into the number 1 seed. So that's the results of the games this week. Those are kind of my thoughts on that. I know I talked about having a look at playoff picture. I'm not going to do that in this video. I'll have that coming out in a later video tomorrow, talking about my thoughts for, just playoff hopes for a bunch of teams. But specifically, we're going to look at the Bears, of course, because I'm a Bears fan. We're going to look at what my thoughts are for the Bears' hopes, and we're going to look at the Chiefs just because, I know a lot of people want the Chiefs out of the playoffs. And to be honest, I agree. It would be refreshing. I will not be feeling bad at all for Chiefs fans. I've said it before. I'm not really a Chiefs hater like most people, but certainly I do root for parity. It is enjoyable to see different teams in the playoffs for once. And this year feels perfect for it. We've got a lot of teams, especially in the AFC, we've got a lot of teams that have been in there a lot in recent years. Mainly the Chiefs that have always been up there at the top this last decade. So to finally see them quite possibly not be making it in, I'm okay with that. But for the sake of, looking at how much are they really eliminated yet, I do want to go into that because I do still think that the Chiefs do have a chance still. They're not out of it. But it's pretty fair to say the Chiefs pretty much need to win out. And they may even need some help to get in. It really for the Chiefs, I'll spoil it a little bit. It's mainly, to no surprise because they're in the same division. But for the wild card spot, for the Chiefs, the biggest thing is going to be how they and how the Chargers do. The Chiefs are going to need to hope to get as close to winning out as possible, and they're going to need to hope for the Chargers to lose as many games as they can, which Chargers just barely beating the Eagles tonight doesn't help that a ton. So I'm going to end this video here. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you. I will see you in that next video looking at the playoff picture going forward.